Hello, Dorothy.
Hi.
I'm really happy because my name is Andreas Kaluza and I do podcast. And in my new series, the aim is simply to do podcasts with people or to interview people who have something to say, something interesting, cool people who have got good energy. And Dorothy,
Okay.
you're one of them.
Thank you. You hit it.
Thank you so much. Dorothy, how would you like to be introduced to our audience?
Okay, I am a former orchestral musician who has worked in orchestras and also a quintet, several quintets for 42 years. And now I am a pianist. I went back to the piano, which I played as a child. And I've given a lot of concerts. I work with colleagues from the opera or former colleagues from the opera. I've gotten into composing. And I did also a lot of singing, but that's also over.
Interesting. And the reason why I found your life so interesting, you were practically the first woman in a quite renowned orchestra, a very big one in Germany, in Hamburg, isn't it?
Okay, but when I got to Hamburg, there were already a couple. I think the same year there were other women here, but there were two other women when I played in the Stuttgart Philharmonic. They were much smaller orchestras, but I say I was the first one in a bigger orchestra on contract because they hire a lot of students here, and when they need someone, or like for stage music, but it doesn't mean those people will get the job, So
Okay.
I was one of the first, and actually the first in a major orchestra. So when I got to Hamburg, there was a lady. She's actually a fine hornist who played in Munich. She didn't get through her tenure, and then she went to the Concertgebouw and made a big reputation in Holland. So so that was when women were on the march in the 70s.
Okay. Interesting also, I think. What about your upbringing? What brought you practically into music?
Okay, my father had been a cathedral organist in Newark, New Jersey, and he got multiple sclerosis, MS. So because of that, my mother steered him into going into a smaller job. So he went to Hackensack, which is where I spent most of my child. Yeah, it's an Indian name, Hackensacki Indians. So we moved from Newark to Hackensack, and he was the organist of a Catholic church there for 25 years. But of course, he was already, how do you say it, im Abbau. He was declining in health. And so when I knew him, he played with one hand for 25 years, which is pretty amazing considering it was a big church and it seated 1,000 people. So, it was a big job, but it was horrible to see that. But he was my first piano teacher and also organ teacher, because I've had 3 or 4 organ jobs. I mean, no one does that in Germany. Here you have to have you have to already be in college before you're going to play anywhere.
Yeah.
And you have to be recommended. But of course, my father recommended me, and I used to sub for him when I was 17.
So he taught you both instruments?
Yeah.
When you were a child or something
teacher.
like that?
Yeah, first teacher. So I started the piano when I was 7.
7,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then later...
And then when I was 11, he gave me organ lessons for only 3 years. And he said, well, I assume you're going to take over my job. Because he was German. Because in Germany, you follow in the footsteps of your elders. And I said, I'm not going to practice up in an organ loft in the wintertime in a cold church that's not heated. And, you're all by yourself, a young girl. No, I didn't want to do that. So I told him, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to do this. And I wanted to become a concert pianist. And he said, look, pianists cost a dime a dozen. So that would have been like
a
groschen in those days for 12 pianists. So he said, you play the horn. And I'd already been taking horn lessons. So I went to Manhattan School of Music and majored in horn. And when I made that decision, at 21, I already had a job playing in a professional woodwind quintet in New Jersey.
Just a question. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you even replaced your father.
Yes.
Yeah. How was that?
He died. He finally died. You don't die of multiple sclerosis. You die of something else. So he died of a heart failure, and I had been playing for him anyway. So I just walked into the job, and I did not want to continue as an organist. So I told my mother, I said, "Mom, I'm going to leave," And so a year later, I was playing in this quintet, and then a year later, I got my first job in an orchestra in Mobile, Alabama. So I left New Jersey, went to Mobile. It was hard, and I was playing first horn, and I didn't like the South. It was too hot. I don't know. I wanted to get out of there.
Okay. How did you live there? Did you live on your own? I mean, you were quite young at the time.
Yes, I was very young. So Mobile, I was by myself.
Yeah.
I actually followed a colleague down from New Jersey Symphony. He was a second trumpet player, and he took the job in Mobile as first trumpet.
Okay.
So I followed him and his wife and his daughter down, and they helped me because I could not have lived alone. When I was very young, I just got my master's in school and went down there. But I knew I didn't want to stay. So after a year, I got a job in the New Jersey Symphony, which had just become a professional orchestra, not a local orchestra, a professional orchestra. And so I went back to New Jersey, moved into my mother's house again.
Yeah.
And I was then, I started a relationship with a solo trombone player who's from Texas. And he literally found me my first apartment. He said, "No, I think you should leave your mother." And that was very hard for me. It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I guess for men it's easier, but it was difficult, And then, so once I was out of there, then he said, this is where we make the connection to Europe. So
Yes.
he said, "Look, we can do a vacation together." In those days, as a couple, you didn't take a vacation together. You had to be married in those days. So he said, "Look, let's go to Germany." I said, "Germany? Why would you ever want to go to Germany?"
And that was in the 1960s, or when was that? More or less.
Yeah, no, this was the beginning of the 70s. So he said, "Let's go to Bayreuth," and I'd never heard of to Bayreuth, as the Germans say. So it's a Wagner festival where they have a huge orchestra in the house that Wagner had built for his operas. So it's very, very famous in Europe, especially in Germany. So we played in the student orchestra, and I can't even remember what position I played. I think I played first horn, but they were almost all Polish people, and that went on. And then after that, to my dismay, he got the solo trombone job that summer in Hanover, Germany, and he wanted to marry me. So he said, "I want you to stay here." So I gave up my teaching position in Hasbro-Kite School System. I was teaching full time and playing horn full time. So I had 2 full-time jobs. In Germany, that's not possible, is it? You can't have 2 full-time jobs.
No, normally
you can't do it.
No.
In the States, you can do. You can have 3 full-time jobs if you can handle it. You do it, and when you're very young, you can do that. I couldn't do it now. That's a long time ago. But anyway, so I saved all my money, and so I stayed over there it was supposed to be a year, and then he had a lot of trouble because he kept talking about his girlfriend who played horn, and as I said before, there weren't any female horn players here.
Yeah.
These 2 women in the South, I think they were already here. They were like C or D orchestras. They're probably going to get on here and tell me where they played. I don't remember anymore. One of them was American, I know that. But anyway, we went to Switzerland because I got the solo horn job in Basel. So in the radio orchestra, it wasn't permanent. That was the other problem. So I was this first female hornist in Switzerland, and that didn't work out. I took 2 auditions, and in those days they even had somebody from the Arbeitsamt,
from the job center.
The job center, to make sure that they didn't hire a woman.
And interesting. And how did you perceive Germany at the time? And was Switzerland any different to Germany? A couple of words on that, please.
You know, all I cared about was playing the horn. I didn't see anything else. So if you're young and you have a goal, and I would do anything to do what I wanted to do. So, and I found the right partner at the time to go along with it, and he really admired me and supported me in my efforts and held a lot from me as a musician. And I used to accompany him also. I remember I played in Geneva at a big competition for trombone players. And so I was playing horn with something like 15 trombone players, one horn player. And it was exciting. And I accompanied him, Frank Martin, concerto for trombone and orchestra. And I'll never forget that. It was really, and he still is a fine trombonist. So anyway, and then after Basel, because I couldn't get a contract, and I took an audition in Karlsruhe. That's another story, because there were no women in the orchestra. And I went in there, I had my hair done at a hairdresser's in those days, and I walked in pants, in slacks. No women in those days in Germany wore slacks. They all wore dresses.
Yeah.
And I walked in there, and they laughed. You should have heard the colleagues in the orchestra, it was the entire orchestra, they laughed. A woman coming in here with a horn.
Yeah.
And after 5 minutes, you could hear a pin drop. And I had a new thing that I started doing. I always played the Hindemith Sonata, which needs a lot of power and a lot of strength. And and I played it through from the beginning to the end. And they were actually shocked. So they offered me this second horn job, and they said, you have to wait a year. And I said, yeah, but I have to get out of Basel because I can't get a contract in Basel. So, to make a long story short, I didn't take the job. Then I had to talk myself out of taking the job. And I did, and they said, well, come back in a year and you can try for the first position. And a colleague of mine in Hamburg later was one of the 3 men whom they wanted to get that position. And so they sent him home, and then they said, you can have the job.
Okay.
I mean, it was almost embarrassing, you know.
And what about the language? I mean, you came from the US.
Terrible. I mean, how do you speak German when you've had 6 lessons? How can you get along in a country? You can't.
And I think you had to talk German because at this time, probably the knowledge of the people, they didn't speak English.
Very
not
little.
many, yeah.
Very little. So when Jan got the job in Hanover, I went right to the Volkshochschule and studied German for 1 year, the whole time he was playing. And you can learn pretty fast, especially in the teacher, I'll never forget it, he was Yugoslavian. He was wonderful. He used to jump on the tables and explain what the difference is between dative and accusative. It was really wonderful. Yeah, and then when we went to Switzerland, that was the second year, then he found, through his colleagues, a professor from the college, and so we had private German lessons. But his German was on such a high level, I remember now words that I never used because, it was very, very high German. So I only took 2 years of German, and I've been here, since the early 70s, and I have actually technically retired here. But you know what? If you really want to learn a language, then you read comic books, and you study. I mean, I still have my computer there to check words out every day. Der, die, das. You got to make sure you got the right cases and the right pronunciation and the right endings. And it's an ongoing process. You're never finished with the language. Even English. I'm learning English from you because your English is really good.
Thank you so much. And what about the Swiss German? Because I would struggle there. What about you?
I could understand it.
Okay.
After a year, I was there a year and a half. I can understand it. And Basel, it's called Schweizerdeutsch.
Yeah. Exactly.
And in those days, I could speak a lot of French too, so so that was nice. But what was funny, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but it was kind of funny when you first come to a country and you hear the adults, and you hear the little kids speaking Schweizerdeutsch,
yeah,
and it's cute. As my boyfriend used to say, oh, it's cute. But then he said, yeah, but then the adults talk like that too. So, you can't put them down. That's the way it is, right? But in the meantime, now I can understand, but most North Germans cannot understand Swiss German. And of course, in Basel, it's different than in Zurich. And the further inland you go, the deeper it is.
Yes.
But it's like that with it's the same thing in Hamburg and Hanover have the best German in Germany. And when you go south, when you're in Stuttgart or Bayern or Schwarzwald, it's not Schwarzwald, what do you call it? By Karlsruhe.
That would be Baden-Württemberg in German. I don't know how to.
So it's a dialect.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, colleagues here, we had a solo cellist from Stuttgart. Yeah, when he retired, he went back. They feel more at home around with their own people around them. I can understand that.
And what about feeling at home here at the time? Was there never like the impulse of wanting to go back to the States?
Oh yeah, I wanted to go back. I mean, I was here for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't work. So 1 year has become, more than 50 now. And I thought then, well, if I can get a really good job, then it's good. I wanted to play an American orchestra. And now I can say there's a big cultural difference between music in the States and in Europe.
And what's the difference?
Well, I mean, you can start with the violins. They call it off the string, on the string. It's the way they play. When they play Mozart in New York Philharmonic, it's not the same as Mozart in the Berlin Philharmonic or the radio orchestra in Bayerischer Rundfunk or here in Hamburg. It's different. And now I can say that because I've studied piano here for years also. So living here, you kind of get into the feeling of how to express yourself on these instruments. And I changed horns right away when I got to the opera in Hamburg. My colleague said, also, this is interesting, in the States, they put their horns, the bell of the horn on their leg.
Yeah.
And they put their hand inside of it. Yeah, and you have a sound that, of course, because the leg is taking off some of the sound. And when I got to Hamburg, the guy whom they had sent home in Karlsruhe didn't get the job. I was offered the job. He came to Hamburg and he said, if you want to get through your tenure here, you should change your hand position. And what did that mean? So he said, you have to hold the horn off your leg. In other words, you're holding it. And in the beginning, that was hard for me because that means your arm. Yeah, it's like playing two violins. You're using your arm muscles. And so you're always holding your horn. So if you're playing 4 or 5 opera hours, you're always holding your horn. So it's.
What would be like the weight of a horn?
Oh, I don't know. It's 2.5 kilos or something, 5 pounds. It's not that heavy. But I also played the tuba, the Wagner tuba at the end. But that you put on your leg. Also you had a little cushion or something to rest it on your thigh, and then you would hold it. And tuba players also do the same thing. Real bass tuba players, they have this little cushion and they put it on their legs. But a horn, no, in Germany, you hold your horn up.
Okay.
But I changed the instrument too. In the end, I wanted to, they all said you have to play a German instrument. And I went out and bought a German instrument, but this is interesting, it still didn't work because I had this concept in my head of what a horn sounded like in New York City. And there I had studied with the solo hornists in the Met.
Yeah.
And both solo horn players of the New York Philharmonic. So they had the horn on their leg and they had a different concept. And I never really got into the German sound. And then I ended up buying I had a German horn for several years. And then I bought an English French horn, a Paxman. Oh, and of course I had an American Lewis also for years that I bought in the States. So it didn't really jive here. They really didn't like it. And I changed mouthpieces. I did all kinds of things to make it change. But I'm convinced now, if you've got this sound in your head,
yes,
you are going to produce it the way you were brought up in wherever you studied.
And I mean, you played many, many years in the Hamburg Opera
Yeah.
Orchestra. And which horn did you use there?
Well, I'm not sure when I bought my Lewis. I still have the bell from the Lewis. 80, I think I bought it in 83. I played it 25 years.
Yes.
They gave me a lot of trouble. And then finally I bought a Paxman. We were on tour in London, in England, and I had ordered it and I picked it up at the factory. So my best colleague, this guy who had left the job and didn't get the job in Karlsruhe, again, we were always good friends. And he already had a Paxman also. So we stuck out in the section because we were not playing German horns and everyone else played a German horn. And I did try out 8 instruments over 2 years. I never found the one I liked. So I stayed with the English French horn.
Okay. And what about the social life in an orchestra? I'm quite sure that you did a couple of concerts also abroad.
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
was-
we
how
did.
was-
We had tours.
You with all of these guys?
And there were
How
mostly
did-
guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had, the first year we had 10 women. We all started in 1976. And it took a few years because they really didn't want any women in the orchestra. And so there was a solo flutist woman and me in the horn section. And I changed my position 3 times. That's kind of normal. You move down actually when you get older. And I had been playing high horn for years, and then I moved to low horn.
Okay. And what about the trips to? Where did you go? Did you do a trip with the orchestra around the world, or how was that? How is
Well,
how
the
is
first
it
one, I just
traveling?
got in the orchestra and
Yeah.
they said, well, we're going to Switzerland.
Okay.
And you're going with us.
Back.
Yeah,
Because
so
you
I
came
just,
practically
I had
from
just been,
Switzerland.
yeah, I'd just been on tour with the Stuttgart Philharmonic, and from Geneva, I flew to Hamburg for the audition. And then after I got the job, they said, oh, we're going to do a tour of Switzerland. So we ended up back in the same place, on tour with a fantastic orchestra. And in those days, we had really good conductors. That's the reason why I wanted to come to Hamburg. That was the number one reason. And because they said that the job, that you could not be fired in Hamburg, there's a special thing. Well, that's not so, because I do have a lawsuit behind me. So they did try to throw me out because I had a lot of problems and I had a facial paralysis. I mean, I've been through a lot in Hamburg, But anyway, that was that tour. And then I did 2 tours to Japan.
Yeah.
In 84 and 96. And then there were tours to South America. The one time I had this facial paralysis, so I couldn't play. And then towards the end, it's the way it is in all orchestras. When you're older,
Yeah.
they really don't want to take you. They'll take some 25-year-old or 30-year-old, but you're getting up there. So then they'd say, well, maybe you should go. Maybe you're too old.
And isn't that so easy to substitute you for a younger one? Is she capable then to
Well, we had 10
occupy-
horns. We had 10 horns. That means, and usually you've got 4. In some operas you've got 2. Sometimes you've got 8 in Wagner, or 4 horns and 4 tuben. What was your question? They try to do it in Germany. It's not like the States. They try to do it that they have like 10 or 15 years between the age gap.
Yeah.
So if I were, let's say, 55, they would try to hire someone who's like 25 or 30. Yeah. And then that's guaranteed that they're going to assume that this young person is going to be really good for 20 years. They want to see how many years they can get out of you. It's the same thing in the States. So they'll hire a very young person because he's got potential. And in the States, I mean, I tried out for the Boston Symphony. I was number 78 of, I think, 90. I mean, that's a joke. And the guy they took had been subbing there.
For one job.
For one job.
90 applicants.
Well, actually, I'm trying to
Wow.
think if there was another position open also. No, I think it was just the 3rd horn job. That's pretty hard. That's the way it was in the States. Now here in Germany also, there may be, I don't even know right now. We used to have 30 applications. years ago, you didn't get that many because there weren't many people playing horn. So we'd have 30, and then we'd invite, let's say, 20.
Okay. And what about the competition within the opera? Because when you're a spectator, you look at the orchestra and you think, okay, that's like an orchestra that works very fine together. And what about are there little kind of envy stuff between the colleagues, competition? Is it that every musician hears when the others makes a mistake or something like this?
You know what? People are people, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a girlfriend and she's, let's say 2 women are friends, but the one is fat and the other is skinny. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's always envious stuff, and there are brass players who never make mistakes, but that could be negative because they're doing everything perfectly the way they're told, the way the conductor wants them to do it. They might not be that musical, but they're playing perfect, So some people criticize them.
Yeah.
And if you're, so most musicians have pretty good ears, there are some people who don't have good ears, but they hear pretty well. So the more you hear, and of course there's all this little talk going on. I used to have colleagues who would turn around when someone in the horn section made a mistake. They'd turn around and look. I mean, I don't know whether that happens as much as it used to, but it's horrible when that happens because you feel terrible, and it puts you on the spot because then you realize you're under pressure. You can't really make mistakes. I mean, of course you can make mistakes, but every time you make a mistake, someone's going to hear it. And you can't, it's obvious. There are string players that they wanted to play on the same stand with a certain person because they liked that person or they like the way that person bowed with his right hand.
Yeah.
And they matched together as people, So in those days, there were a lot of foreigners because there were problems in the 70s. It was like not even 30 years after the war. Sometimes there were not enough good Germans there. So they hired a lot of people from the East, not necessarily with the horns, but string players, yeah. I mean, Russians and Polish and Romanians. We had fantastic colleagues from the East. And then the Asians start coming. And now, as you know, boy, they really work. So they can, you can't criticize, you can't say that this nationality plays better than them. It's always on a one-to-one basis. So some people just happen to play better, or you might play good auditions. And then maybe you don't play so well when you're trying to get your tenure for that year. That also happens.
How can that be?
Well, some people just take good auditions. And I played my audition here. I went through 4 rounds in Hamburg. 4 rounds. You know what? I made 1 mistake in 4 rounds. I don't think anyone has ever matched that. That's
Okay.
amazing. And usually, you play your concerto and you might miss 1 or 2 notes. And then they'll put a piece in front of you to sight reads, and you might play it perfect, you might make a mistake. And then come all the orchestra, excerpts. And you have to play 3 or 4, and then they send you out, and then they'll talk about it. And of course, they don't just discuss playing perfectly. They're talking about tuning, they're talking about your sound quality, whether you're going to fit into this section, because it's also a personal thing. And that in Germany is very, very important. In the States, I don't know what they're looking for. When I say I was this number 78 out of 90 people, I mean, how are they going to remember what number 2 sounded like?
Yeah.
And in Germany now, I don't know how it is. I mean, at the end, we always had auditions behind a screen. So that was very nice until you get to the end. And then very often the musicians want to know, well, is that a woman or a man?
I think, or I imagine that this can be very, very stressful, no?
Yes.
How did you suffer from stage fright or something like this? Were you nervous?
You're in my tenure. I had the great opportunity to work with Carl Böhm, And, he's a legend. He's
Okay.
a really famous conductor. That was the only reason I wanted to come to Hamburg. So when I got here and I got the job,
Yeah.
I told the solo horn player, I want to play the concert with Carl Böhm. I think it was in November. And it was at Tchaikovsky Fourth Symphony. And so I remember he stopped the orchestra at one point and asked the horns to play their passage again. And I didn't have anything to play, so I had my horn in my lap. It was first and second horn. And he looked up and screamed and said, like, now you have to play third horn, you have to play. The first horn player got up and defended me, and he said, Herr Dr. Professor Böhm, first of all, this is not a man, because, you address the person Miss or Mrs. And he said, this is a woman playing, and he didn't like the person who had played before me the year before.
Okay.
And so he never apologized, of course. But I was so nervous because this guy had defended me that in the concert, I messed it up and I missed a couple notes. So because of that, I started getting nervousness doing performances, and they extended then my tenure 3 months. I mean, I stayed here, I got through okay, but that can happen. So then I had to start dealing with nerve problems, and there's all kinds of things you can do, but the horn is not an instrument like the violin or the piano, where all the notes are given, they're there.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. So let's wrap our first part here up, I think. That were practically your career as a horn player.
Yeah.
When did you retire? When was that?
Oh, do I have to say that? Because then everyone knows.
More or less.
I am.
Yeah, more or less, I think.
Well, it was in the first decade of this millennium, okay?
Okay, brilliant. So I think people are really eager to listen to our second part.
Stop.
Stop.
Okay, and then you're going to go